So like a bigger problem here was people in 2004, 2005. I'm sure you knew these people, that went out and they're like, hey, the stock market, it's just been going great since, 2003, it was going up, or 2004, it started going up after 2003. But the real estate market was really climbing at that time in the United States. And so people were able to get home equity lines of credit to get that equity out. And then they put it in the stock market thinking, hey, we're going to get 10% or more. And then in 2008, 2009, and 2010, the market dropped like half over those 3 years. And they still had a loan, but they didn't have the money to pay off the loan anymore because it had dropped in the market. So when I say cost of money, it has to be something that is fairly predictable, reliable, and that could happen long term.
Garrett, are you familiar with an all-in-one mortgage?
So explain what you mean by all-in-one mortgage.
I think it's a new product. My financial advisor is geeked on it, and he said that it takes the cash in the bank. So if you have a $200,000 mortgage and you have 50 grand in the bank, you're only paying interest on 150 grand. So less the cash you have in the bank.
Interesting. Do you know much about velocity banking or HELOC buy down? So HELOC's home equity line of credit. And what people have been doing is they've been financing their entire home on a home equity line of credit. And then they use credit cards through the entire month because you get 30 days to float the bank's money. And so what you do is you take all your income and you pay down your home equity line of credit, charge everything throughout the month, and then take the money from the home equity line of credit and pay off the credit cards before you get charged interest. So essentially what you're doing is you're floating the bank's money, paying less interest over that 30 days because you've paid down that loan and then paid off the credit cards. And what it does is it can shave off quite a bit of time that it would take normally to pay your mortgage because you're paying less in interest. And what is kind of nice, I'll give you the pros and cons of it. The pros are you're now on an interest-only loan. So if you do pay it down, it lowers your actual required payment. Where when you're an amortized loan, paying extra will shorten the length of the loan, but it won't lower the payment. You still have to pay the same payment every month. It's just that you're going to pay it off sooner. The downside of a home equity line of credit is the majority of them are variable interest rate. You might be able to lock it in for a year or 3 years or maybe 7 years, but most of them are just tied to an interest rate. And right now that's awesome because interest rates are so low, and they have been low for a very long period of time. But if those interest rates did start to increase, you might have a risk that someone in a fixed mortgage might not have. And you also have to make sure you kind of go through that process of charging on the cards, but not charging too much and then paying this kind of down. So maybe with the all-in-one is they're starting to figure out a way to kind of make that more automated and to make that more elegant in design. But I have not heard that actual term. And I'm just wondering if that's a marketing term or if that's actually what the institutions are calling that. But it sounds very similar to what people would call HELOC buy down or velocity banking.
Okay. And is that something you recommend?
So I would just look at these few things. Okay, so everyone has to kind of understand their cost of money, which is what is the interest rate that you could earn on your money safely, securely, and long term, or what's the interest rate you pay to utilize someone else's money? So we always pay interest, whether we borrow money and we pay that interest to the institution, or whether we pay cash and we forfeit the right to earn interest on our money. But it's easier to see the one that we're paying versus the one that we're forfeiting. And so I'll kind of take you through, Kelly, it's like a little exercise. Imagine I'm willing to lend you money and I'm not going to charge you any interest at all. How much money would you like?
$1 million.
Great. So you want, but how fast do you want to pay me back if I'm not charging you any interest?
As long as possible.
You just want to hold on to that money as long as possible because you know with a high degree of certainty that you could do better than 0%.
Right.
Okay. So cost of money tells us how to really understand finance and not get duped into, hey, this financial guru says you should always have a mortgage. This one says you should never have a mortgage. This financial guru says you should do a 15-year. This one says you should do a 30-year. And the problem is none of them are taking into consideration your cost of money. So for me, the house I just financed here that I'm sitting in, I got 2.75% fixed for 30 years. my cash values in my cash flow banking structure have gotten anywhere from the low end of 4% and the high end of 6.13%. So by actually putting money into my cash values that once I earn interest, it's guaranteed, it's protected from liability and bankruptcy, it's got tax advantages, all that kind of stuff. I would actually pay this home off faster, putting money into that policy, keeping my payment as low as possible on the home, and then I could pull the cash value out and pay that loan off. So for me, because that gives me peace of mind, I don't have any problem, neither does my wife, carrying a mortgage. But we also have to take into consideration something else, is what if you have a significant other that just feels a lot of stress by having a mortgage? And even if you could get 5% because you know that's pretty safe and you're only paying 2.75, but it creates contention or frustration, I think we have to look at peace of mind as our first and foremost thing, because you are your greatest asset, not a stock, not a stock, not a thing like that, right? So we don't want to create any level of scarcity for you that would lower your ability to be productive or happy. Because I mean, here at Free Flow, we want to help people build a life that they love. We want to help people to be more self-expressed. We want people to find hobbies and enjoy life along the way. And if we're consistently concerned about our finances, it confiscates those moments of joy. So knowing your cost of money, that's important. Now we have to look at the risks, because I think mitigating and managing risk is one of the most underutilized, most important things that people are missing out on. So what we have to look at is, if you do this home equity line of credit with interest rates, I mean, how much lower can interest rates go? I mean, I guess they could go somewhat lower, but it's tough to go lower, but they could go up. And when we start looking at how long would it take to pay that off, if it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, now all of a sudden you have more interest rate risk that interest rate could go up, and whatever your technique you were doing could start to be rendered invalid because of the raising interest rate. So I personally have never used that strategy for anything long-term. So when I'm thinking about, like, I have a cabin, it's paid off, we're getting a line of credit against it right now because it's only 2% to get that line of credit. And because I bought some real estate this year, I've borrowed on my cash values, which those cash value loans are 5%. So I'm going, well, why don't I go get this line of credit, pay off my cash value loans and pay 2% rather than 5%? Because if interest rates do go up and get past 5%, I can grab that money right back out of my cash values and pay it off. So I have a contingency plan. So what we really have to look at is a more comprehensive picture and understand, like, risk management, because a lot of people get involved in things without thinking about risk management. So like a bigger problem here was people in 2004, 2005. I'm sure you knew these people, that went out and they're like, hey, the stock market, it's just been going great since, 2003, it was going up, or 2004, it started going up after 2003. But the real estate market was really climbing at that time in the United States. And so people were able to get home equity lines of credit to get that equity out. And then they put it in the stock market thinking, hey, we're going to get 10% or more. And then in 2008, 2009, and 2010, the market dropped like half over those 3 years, and they still had a loan, but they didn't have the money to pay off the loan anymore because it had dropped in the market. So when I say cost of money, it has to be something that is fairly predictable, reliable, and that could happen long-term. Okay, now that you have kind of the whole picture and some of the tools, which is what are you earning versus what you're paying? What level of certainty do you have and guarantees or predictability? And then how does it make you feel being in that process or with that strategy? Does it infringe upon anything that you're doing or how you're thinking or the amount of busy work that it might take? Like, look, it probably might have been more efficient for me to get a 1.9% loan on my car when I bought my truck, but I paid cash because it's just, I was in Seattle at something, sent the money, they dropped the car off at my house. I didn't have to go through loan papers. I don't have a monthly payment to worry about. So some of the hassle factor needs to be part of your consideration because of who you are. So with all that in mind, it is an effective strategy with interest rates where they are today. Now, a strategy that I considered with this house was I could get an interest-only loan for 10 years, but I had to put 35% down instead of 20% down. So my analysis was, what's that 15% down worth to me in my cash values and the interest rate I'm earning there versus the money that I'm saving? And that was one factor. The second factor is interest-only loans go through more scrutiny and therefore could have some additional costs around appraisal or even take longer, which I had to close this loan within a certain period of time. So it's always, I know I'm giving you quite a bit here, but I'm just trying to help everyone to become better with their money, not just reliant upon what I tell them and go, oh, well, Garrett's pretty smart, I think, kind of funny sometimes. So, so we have to, but I think that's kind of the important factor is what are you earning versus what you're paying? What are the risks to do the strategy you're doing? And what are the hassle factors? If you just think about those three things, you're ahead of so many people in this game. But let me give even some more context. I know this is the first question, but I think that when we look at our YouTube channel, this is what people want to know. It's like one of two things they want to know is how to handle these factors is one of the things that comes up most of the time. So it used to be in 2007, you could get what were called negative amortization loans. And these loans were pick-a-payment loans. You had 4 options on the loan. Number 1, you can choose to pay a 15-year mortgage payment. Number 2, you could select to pay a 30-year mortgage payment. Number 3, you could pay interest only. Or number 4, you could pay less than what was owed in the interest, and they would just tack on that interest to the back end of the loan. But if the loan got above 125%, then you have to make bigger payments or a balloon. And so what happened was so many people that were like, oh, well, the market's always going to go up in the real estate, and I have all these other things I could do with the money. Tons of people chose those negative amortization loans. And then when it got past 125%, because the market dropped in real estate, then you saw a collapse of the real estate market with so many foreclosures and things like that. So liquidity, access to cash, that's why I like a 30-year or an interest only with a long-term fixed rate, because then I have choice. Do I want to pay it off? I could if I want, or I paid cash for the cabin because it was competitive nature and I had to come up with the money quick, but now I can go get a line of credit on it, which by the way has no fees to get that line of credit, because they're not giving me the full value. It's 2%, they're going to fix it for 3 years. Once it becomes variable, I could always pay that off. So I personally wouldn't want to do this where I'm putting money on a credit card, paying down the loan and then paying off those credit cards and dealing with that every single month, because now you risk, what if you start spending too much or having to start looking at your finances a little bit closer, because it's now being dealt with in credit cards rather than in checking accounts. But if this all-in-one loan actually gives you that automatically, because you're at the bank, like right now, part of the reason I have a jumbo loan that's sub 3% is because I have enough deposits at the bank that they lower the interest rate. So there are some of those factors that are useful, and it's worth looking into now that you know the risks and now you know some of the other factors that you have.
Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.